Yo, what's up, you guys? So today I've got with me Brian Scott. Brian is the host of the Reality Revolution podcast, and he's the author with the same title, The Reality Revolution, the mind-blowing movement to hack your reality. He's also a life coach, a meditation instructor, a motivational speaker, and a bunch of other dope things, you know what I'm saying? But most importantly, he's a cool guy. So Brian, welcome to the show, man.
What's up, brother? It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, long time no chat. So we'll just get right into it. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself, like your journey, your background, and then how you ended up getting into, the things that you're doing now that you're sharing now online.
Yeah, I find that when I talk about myself in that way, I'm a lot like anybody else, any major spiritual seeker. I've had the ups and downs. I don't really come to you like some sort of ascended master or expert or genius or anything like that. But people have resonated in the ways I've shared my own spiritual journey. And so I was fortunate when I was younger to become an avid speed reader. And so I've researched a lot, but I went through a period of time in my life where I was really struggling and drinking a lot, and thought that I had lost everything. And so I chose at that time, when I had no other resources, to really focus on how I could use my mind to get out of the situation that I'd found myself in. I was in a state of deep poverty and debt, and had lost the love of my life. And so I started experimenting with my consciousness and becoming
Mhm.
sort of a consciousness astronaut, if you might say.
Awesome.
Um, with the amount of stuff that I had read, I started researching it, and I started experiencing these really amazing shifts in my reality. And then I had this crazy event where somebody had broken into my house, and they shot at me, and the bullet bounced off my back. And so I had realized all this knowledge I had, this incredible amount of knowledge, was useless. I had never really shared it with anybody, and it was going to just die with me. And I was really fortunate and grateful to to be alive. And so I just made it my goal and my mission that every day is a new day that I don't deserve, and I'm trying to go out and help other people with the things that I've learned in changing and transforming their life. And in the process, it's transformed my life, and it's been a lot of fun. I've got a chance to meet a lot of cool people like you along the way, and
Thank you.
I've got to see a lot of people that have taken what I've taught and really seen huge and amazing supernatural changes in their life, and with their finances, in the way they find relationships, and the way they awaken spiritually. And it's so amazing, so exciting, that it's become, the purpose of my life is to continue to learn more, because I think I'm a learned teacher. As I learn, I teach, and as I teach, I learn. And so as I do this, it feels like I've gone through different levels of learning with the people that share my podcast. And so, from the book that I wrote so many years ago, we're just like, the book's down here, and we're like way up here, and and we're becoming more advanced every day with the stuff that we're mutually learning as a group. And it's exciting. I've interviewed you on my podcast, and I've sort of tried to integrate all this stuff that I'm learning, because what I find is there's this plethora of information that is out there, and sometimes it can be sort of overwhelming. There's so much, and people don't know how to dissect it. And the people are also open to learning, and they see the ridiculousness of the current spiritual practices, and in the way that they're so stereotypical and so obvious and cliche, and you just walk and you try to find information, then it becomes overwhelming, and there's all these paradoxes. And so I feel like I'm sort of a facilitator in helping people digest all this information. I'm sort of a conduit for people that don't really have the time, and I'm reading stuff for them and teaching them from this stuff. And maybe that's an answer of who I am.
There you go. Appreciate that, Brian.
Yeah,
When I found your channel several years ago, dude, we have a lot of similarities, right? Because you and I
we
were
do.
both like into like Neville Goddard, law of assumption, law of attraction, channeling, and you were just pumping out all these videos. So I was always encouraged. And what I liked about you, bro, is you just come off very genuine and authentic, and you are like that learner teacher thing you said. It's like
Yeah.
you're teaching as you go, right? You're learning, and just like that's just how I am. And I just really resonated with a lot of the stuff that you were sharing. But I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier. I did read your book, and yeah, I didn't. You're a good writer, and it was like
Well,
it was
thanks,
a
man.
very it was a lot of very exhaustive book, very comprehensive, and I was telling Remy about it. I was like, yeah, Brian's a good writer, man. He knows a lot of things, so I know there's a lot of content you can keep pumping out. But you did mention just a while ago, but in the beginning of your book about that time when you had someone show up at your house and someone shot at you. So I want to talk about that because I know that was kind of something that was life changing for you and kind of led you down some sort of trajectory in your life, right? So do you mind kind of taking us
Yeah.
step by step in that? Because I love stories, right? And my channel,
Oh
like I
yeah.
love sharing stories. So if
It
you don't
gets
mind,
trippy too.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know it does. So when
It gets
he
trippy.
shot at quote unquote you,
Yeah.
I would like you to elaborate on what that means.
So I'm a big American football fan. I root for my Broncos. I was raised a Bronco fan. At least at the time of my spiritual, I was still super into the Broncos. And this is this is the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
And my team won the Super Bowl. So when that happens, when your team wins the Super Bowl, you don't go to sleep. You sit there and you watch everything that they say, and you just kind of bask in the joy of it. And I was doing that. And so I think what happened is I lived in a house where you could walk out the living room, and then you could walk over to the bedroom. And there's two sliding doors, and there was like a big backyard, in the back with a pool. And they had jumped into the backyard and then had checked my bedroom, and nobody was there. And these people home invasions had gone on in my neighborhood. They had not really seen. I think it was like 3 or 4 in the morning, right? I had passed out on the couch, kind of just still watching TV, and they had not seen me. And so they had gone in through the the door. And so I kind of looked over, and I noticed that I had a screen. The glass door was halfway open, and I would never do that. I freak out. One of my favorite things in my world is my cat. So I was like, oh shit, my cat's got out, and I've been so like distracted watching TV that I let my cat out. So I'm looking down everywhere, and I'm calling his name. PJ, where are you, brother? Where are you? And I walk up to the back door, and there's this kid holding a gun just pointed right at me. So I don't know why, but my first instinct was to shut the door, and I turned and I ran. And it was one of those glass doors that has double pane. So
right.
when they fired, and if people have heard interviews of me, they've probably heard the same story, but I got to tell it, so it is what it is. But everything slowed down for me. And there was a point in time, and you know how you go back and look at high consciousness moments. It's like they aren't real, or it's hard to remember them. They're just like, when it's happening, it's so like, I'll never forget this, but it's such a high level of consciousness that you just barely remember. And it's still very clear to me because it was like time froze. I was in a movie, and I'm a big science fiction fan, so I could, I'm like, but I could hear the pop of the gun, and it wasn't a loud gun; it was like a 22. So I think that's part of it. And then the bullet hitting the glass, and I could hear the shattering of the first glass, and then a long time. And I'm looking around, and I'm starting to see like it's sort of like echoes or reflections that are slightly different all around me of different variations of this event. You know what I'm saying? I even sensed my own presence, like I had come back in time and I was monitoring it. And so then I'm running, and I see myself in blood over here. I see myself shot in the leg over here, and I hear the second window break. And then I feel like a thump on my back, and I turn the corner, and there's someone else in the other room, and they fire at me, and it's just like I could see the bullet just like I had experienced this moment before, like it was a moment frozen in time or something. And so then I was able to escape through the garage, and they ran off, and eventually they were able to find them, and they were literally people living across the street from me.
Oh,
And
really?
so
Oh, wow.
yeah, and so here's the really crazy thing. So then after I had that happen, I went back, found my cat. My cat was okay. He came back, even though the glass was shattered. And they the cops showed up, and they said, something's wrong. You're bleeding. There's a little bit of blood trickling down your back. Call the ambulance. Take me in. You know what I mean? Like they took my shoes. They have those little paper shoes they give you at the hospital, and so and then they took and then so I had like this paper gown, and they're just checking me out, and they're like, We don't see anything that did the bullet it didn't enter. And later they found the bullet. It had bounced off my back and lodged into the wall. And maybe it was because it was a 22 and the bullet was slowed down by the window, but it felt like something else had sort of happened in that moment, that I had something had happened. So when I came back to my house, I noticed little different things, like a different lampstand. I started to get back into my usual routine. Maybe I'd go for a run, and there's a lot that I would always cut across, because you always cut. I'll cut across an empty lot, and then I came upon it, and it was an old building that had been there. And then I started really getting concerned. I started seeing shifts, like movie references. It was like my own personal, like what people have experienced, the Mandela effect. It was my own little personal Mandela effect. There was movies that I knew that had never been made, movies that had happened. I'm a big movie fan. My favorite band has like this album that I never had been, like, I've listened to all their albums. So many things that, I went to a therapist, and I said, I think I've suffered some sort of post-traumatic stress. I'm aware of the APA and the different ways that they medically treat, psychosis. And I thought that I had experienced some sort of stress or trauma that had caused me to not remember. It had impaired my memory. And they said, nothing was wrong with me. And I continued to see shifts more and more that had happened after that. And so I started to really, at first, worry that I had gone insane. I wanted to prove in some part of me that I wasn't insane. So I used that knowledge of research, and I was a debater in college, and I learned how to speed read and really, really fast. So I literally read like thousands of books. I become adept at quantum physics, interviewed quantum physics teachers in my area. When I become obsessed with something, it's kind of crazy. During this time, I started experimenting, because really I knew that it's not just knowledge that's going to help me. I need to experiment. Started doing different yoga techniques, exercise techniques, and energy techniques, and constantly, magic techniques and ways for me to shift into realities. And I started to figure out that I could experience and shift into different realities, and that this was actually something that could be taught, as techniques that could be taught, and ways of understanding that I could do. And so that was what was so profound about it. And when I had gone back and realized, I should be dead, I had saved and I can send you, I had saved in my bookmarks the articles about the event. I had, a man was shot and two were arrested. And I had saved these 4 articles, and I went back the other day to post, because somebody had asked about it. And one of the articles said man dies in home invasion.
What?
One of the articles, when you click on it, it was a dead link, right? It was like, I would not have saved the article that said it. So then I started to really start questioning if I was actually alive. You know what I mean? If I was in such a state where I was not ready to die, and it would be so devastating. And then I had known about what Neville Goddard said. He talks about how when you die, you end up in a 20-year-old body, and that you think you continue to live your life. You have the same fears, you have the same loves, and you keep on moving on. I still think that, because my life is so wonderful and so crazy. I would never have imagined that I would be somebody that does YouTube and a writer. At the time, I was just, in the mortgage business, and I sold books. As a result of that, I had made a commitment that, like, how can I make a difference with this knowledge? Because it became a really powerful way to transform yourself almost instantaneously. Somebody that I had experienced struggles with overcoming. I used to drink all the time, and I could use these techniques to instantaneously overcome an addiction. I could help people that were drinking one day, and the next day they felt they had no desire to drink. I had people that I would talk to that they were lonely one day, and the next day they're literally in love with somebody. And I started seeing it become so exciting. I know that you have seen this too. When you start teaching this, and then people come to you, and then you kind of help them, and then you see it happen, and it seems like it happens more intensely for other people than yourself, because you're not a part of it, it becomes just so enthralling and exciting. It's just so powerful that it's like my life's dedicated to it, because I see people that are struggling, And it's like, dude, you're just like a reality away. You can see it right there. And the more you start to see the multiverse, you can see the other possibilities for people. And you look at people and they are struggling. The homeless man on the street, the woman that is dying, and you can see that all they have to do is just simply jump into another reality. And then so that hopefully answers your
Oh
question.
yeah, that answered. Yeah. I mean, now there's more questions though.
Right.
At least for the viewers. I love your passion about this, man. Like, so we'll get into the whole, jumping into different realities, for people who have certain desires. But so what the heck happened then? Like, what do you think happened that day? Because obviously there were some different things that you were I mean, there were actually pretty big things like buildings and your dad. So what happened?
I cannot give a definitive. As I've done this shifting I talk about, I've started to learn how to communicate with my higher self, which I have been taught in the law of one. My higher self is like me, like 3 billion years in the future. And so I've actually started to learn how to communicate with this version of myself. There's a version of yourself that comes back through time and that helps you. And so I've gotten a little bit better of idea of what happened. This was an important catalyst to propel me on my path. And there's definitely a reality where I died. But more importantly, when I was alive, a couple of days later, right, I astrally traveled back in time to myself to tell myself to wake up, to look at the door. And I remember when I had that experience, I was like, something alerted me to look over at the door. And so I kind of feel like I went back and helped myself out. And that this was something that was supposed to happen to me, that it's sort of a catalyst that set up this journey for me to experience this and then teach it. Because in reality, I'm just nothing more than a teach learner that has been placed in this in particular place, and I found my purpose. The world is becoming multidimensional. We're entering into a new actual level of quantum reality, a quantum shift in our entire planet. There's a fourth density light, a more complex form of light that makes up everything, and we are entering into a world of a multiversal reality. That's why you see it on every great movie. It is about parallel. You see Endgame. I could literally name hundreds of movies and TV shows and books. People are not aware of this, and so I feel like I sort of became like a facilitator for people to actualize this reality, this thing that you can actually shift, because we do live, and there's going to be a time in the future where I think that everybody acknowledges for sure that we shift into realities and that they will be aware of it and they will be shifting on purpose. Maybe not now, maybe like 80, 100 years from now, it's going to be a multiversal world. If that makes sense. People, maybe with active technologies, for some people, they'll use virtual realities and controlled quantum states, and we will be able to use controlled observer states in the lab so people can shift. I don't know. It's something I'm fascinated. But I feel like if you ask me what happened, I don't think I'll ever know until I move to a higher level of knowing. But I do suspect that this was, I had planned for this thing to happen to me as at some point where I was meant to experience this, because it propelled me as a catalyst to realize it took me away from myself. That the world that we're in is really designed so that all we think about is ourselves all the time. And I'm no different. I was inside myself, my own mind, my own world. And I sort of stepped outside of myself and realized, if I had died, my kids, what would they have thought of me, of just this loser that died that night? What are my friends, what would I have been looked at? All this stuff I could have done. So it gave me this inner purpose and fire that I probably wouldn't have had if I hadn't have had that experience. Everybody I meet that's, on the spiritual journey has something like that. I've met so many people that have had near-death experiences, that have had different events where they could have died or they overcame stuff. That's just one portion of mine. And I'm sure when you told me your story about what you had gone through and how you tried to heal and stuff, that was a part of that propelled you on your journey, right?
Definitely. Yeah, it's amazing. It definitely was something that propelled you, to go on this path. And you even mentioned in your book, I remember just saying, reality isn't what you think it is, because when you're dead, you're dead. Obviously, that's how people think. And here you are, you're alive, right? And
right.
One day there's no building, and now there's a building, and then your kids are one way and your kids are, so what is reality then? Because if it's not just this physical world, which is solid and dense, and it is what it is, and you're saying no, it isn't what it is. How would you define reality then?
Reality is what it is to you. It's an
Okay.
individualized, personalized experience. Each of us are living within our own reality tunnels or bubbles. And
Mm.
our realities interact, and we're co-creating on some level these different realities, but reality is what it is to me. There's no other way for me to truly understand reality. I do believe that the reality that I'm experiencing now in this limited body with just two eyes and two ears and sensory organs, my mouth and nose, is a very limited world, very much like the people that live in the cave, like Plato's cave story, and they barely they see the shadows on the wall. And I think that that the reality, what we think is we're experiencing a limited version within this avatar body that we walk around in. And as we become more aware of how reality can shift, as we learn from quantum physics, it's not a stuck reality that is shared by all. My reality is different than yours. We share some realities when we interact, but reality is what it is for me, and it's different for you. That's the best way for me to explain it. But I've been trying to answer that with each of my episodes, and I don't think that there's an answer. Reality is an illusion. There is no true reality except for the creator, when you're in the creator's grasp and breath in that moment, in those moments of the eternal now. But other than that, everything else is just an illusion.
When you think about, you were mentioning about how, we could choose our reality and we have a choice. But then, a lot of people with their reality, they think it's fate. Like, okay, here I am. This is my money situation. This is my health situation. Maybe the universe or God is giving this to me for, to teach me a couple of lessons in this life. So to a lot of people, that would be fate. But are you saying that there's another version of them that, like, if they want to get out of that, or is it really meant to be for them to be sick so they can learn these lessons in life? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a little bit different for everybody. I think that we are, in most cases, the architects of our fate. But as I have learned from Quo, one of my great teachers, is that it's a great paradox that we realize when we realize that we are of the creator, that we have the spark of the creator within us. And as Jesus like to say, I am God, like we are, as Neville Goddard taught, that we are God. That if we are God, why is it the things that we're desiring are not manifesting in the world? Why isn't it? And why aren't things happening exactly like we want them? You know what I mean? Like if I lose a limb, why can't I immediately replace it? And that is why we're here. We chose to come from a place of immediate and absolute manifestation to a limit, to this limit which limits our access to this universal subconscious mind. And we are in this process of limiting for a reason. And while we do have this power that we had before, we have this, there's only one requirement, and that is that we have to believe, and we have to place our attention on that thing for it to grow. And we need to have love in order for it to be flourishing. And so we are learning lessons that allow us to polarize in a certain way while we're in this illusion, which is nothing more than sort of a video game, that each moment is a catalyst that helps us determine where we're going. It's like a choose your own adventure story, and that we're choosing where it goes. Do you remember those books back in the day?
Yeah, yeah, of
The
course.
choose your yeah. So I'm just going along, and that's what we're and this illusion is we're inside the book choosing our adventure as we go to the next level of consciousness. That's just my theory.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, Neville talks about how we live in a world, he calls it like the school of educated darkness, so there are things that we're learning in this life, just like the stuff that you're sharing, the stuff that I've been through
Right.
that have been challenging for us. Neville's been made fun of for his voice, or the teacher even told the class, I'll never make a living speaking, and then he ended up being who he was today. He
Right.
even mentioned about how that he's like, maybe I needed that jolt in my life, so, but it's like really hard in those moments to think that you can get out of it, right? Because people do feel stuck, right? Especially if it's been an experience for them for years, whether it's financially, romantically, or health wise. But you mentioned about there's like all we have to do is believe, though, and just in my experience, in my conversation with people, religious or not, a lot of people have different ways of explaining what believe means, because a lot of people say, well, I believed and
Yeah.
nothing happened. Another person has a different experience when they say that they believe. So how would you define, if we were to use that, typical phrase, what would you say is like the secret to manifesting? What does real belief look like to you, Brian?
The more, as you can share with me, as somebody that is regularly working on manifesting, the one thing that you start to realize is that your beliefs and thoughts are also unconsciously creating. And so once you become to this incredible realization that you are playing a role as architect of your fate, you then start to realize that your unconscious and subconscious mind is also playing a role, and it has beliefs. It has been installed with beliefs that you're not even aware of. In some cases, there are accidental beliefs that occurred from when we're younger, and they continue to flourish. And sometimes what we're doing is excavating these old beliefs in order to believe. We want to believe this thing, but then there's this little doubt. And where does that doubt come from? It maybe comes from our mom, saying that money doesn't grow on trees, Brian. It's going to be hard for you to make money. It's going to be difficult for you to be successful. Most people don't make it that, high. It's never going to really happen for you. And so if I have that as a belief, but then I say, I am successful, and I start to visualize myself as successful, there's also this counteracting force within my subconscious that I have to deal with. And for some people, it's a deep ocean. It's very hard to excavate. For some people, it's a surface level river that they eventually can figure out and pull up all the stones. But that to me, that's the big thing that you move towards as you start becoming a master manifester.
Yeah. So how do you think we can do that? Because you even use that phrase like hacking your subconscious. So there's like this conditioning that people have had for many years through whether it's our parents or education, our environment, people saying an affirmation, but they still say it doesn't work. I've tried it. Like there's plenty of people who say that affirmations work, others say that it doesn't. And then I know the response, a typical response would be, well, you just have to believe it, right? But the question, I guess, once again would be, well, what does believe really mean then? Like,
Obviously, it's a complicated question, and faith and belief is very complicated. It's an absolutely fascinating thing. What does it mean to believe in
yeah.
something?
Because a religious person, right? Like, my background, I grew up religious. A religious
Yeah,
person would say faith or belief, it's synonymous to religious people. It's trusting in God. Let God do whatever he wants to do.
right.
Or, if you're spiritual, you'll say, let the universe will do what's best for you, which means maybe you're meant to have these, to suffer a little
Yeah.
bit more to teach you these lessons. But another really, no, belief is, you believe a certain way, you can get out of that reality. It's just a matter, it's up to you. So I know it could get a little
Yeah.
tricky, but do you have any?
I think that the greatest teacher was Jesus. I mean, when you read into it, he knew exactly. He told us how to do affirmations without vain repetition. If I'm just repeating the affirmation and over again, I'm just thinking of the opposite. That you have to go into the feeling of it and believe. You have to believe in order to receive. You have to believe first. The process of believing first is difficult, and this gets to why people struggle when they hear the Neville Goddard technique, but then it doesn't work for them. And why I think that in many ways, Neville Goddard didn't, when you listen to him, I don't think he really realized how difficult it can be to properly manifest. It is like an art form. It's very much, it reminds me of swinging a baseball. If you've ever swung a baseball at a really, really good pitcher, like somebody that throws a curveball or like 100-mile-per-hour fastball, and you get really good at it and you swing and you might be able to hit it 20% of the time, and there's an art form, and each time you do, you have to move your body and collect your mass and lean in and gain power and use your footwork, and it's like playing golf, right? It really is. You're constantly manifesting with every single breath.
Right.
That's the thing that is so hard for people to understand. Every thought is a thing, and oftentimes it's two thoughts that are opposite. And so oftentimes it's the majority of thoughts that end up being creative, if you know what I'm saying. So if what I have found is that it's through that, if you can truly believe that you're in it, people don't understand that. A good place where I really understood that was taking acting lessons. And when you have ever taken an acting lesson or written fiction, it's a good place to start. When you really delve into a character and escape from the outside world and imagine an event, it's not something that you're just sitting and doing for a couple of minutes in a meditation, although that's a good beginning place.
Right.
When I do meditations, I really think it's the beginning place. But when Neville was so good, because he was an actor. And the thing that I didn't know about Neville is that he also acted. He was a dancer on Broadway, but he also had credits as an actor on Broadway. So he memorized his line, he delivered it, he knew how to get into the role, and he was physical. So he could move his body and dance. And he was I can manifest just like that, because he embraced the physicality and the reality of the role. And he could imagine, he could go into a situation, and if he wanted to be a football player, he could really imagine that he was the football player holding the football, engaging the senses. And for a lot of people, that's hard to do. Sounds great. Sounds easy, right? But it's really not at the beginning until you understand it. And so that's why people may struggle. That's why Neville Goddard maybe didn't understand. It's kind of like I've said before, like if Michael Jordan tries to teach you how to play basketball, well, why aren't you dunking it? Why aren't you just, shooting it from there? You take things for granted. So that's one of the things I've noticed with some of those great teachers, is that they're not really engaging how difficult it is. It's one reason why I kind of think that there are certain kinds of virtual reality that'll become very powerful when we understand how it works. Because I think that even TV and media is creating, we see it manifesting in the world. There's going to be a point where there's some device that is able to capture a reality in first person in a certain way, so it engages our senses, maybe with certain drugs. I don't know, but I do believe, I can feel it in my heart, that we're going to get into a place where we engage ourselves in a certain way, so that, boom, we start to see that reality then happen in our lives. Right?
So basically,
that's the thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying basically it's either, whether you use affirmations, visualizing virtual reality. I guess what you're saying is that when it comes to believing, it's a matter about like being the thing, like feeling the reality, whether
Really
you're
actually
using
being in it
senses.
to where you are not considering it from another person. With the subconscious mind, it does require a variety of different techniques. The thing that I had is I if somebody tells you something 1,000 times and then you try to change that belief with one time, it's hard. So I have found repetition through sleep meditation, for me, was a really powerful technique. Now, some people, they don't do well in sleep meditations. They can't sleep in the sleep meditation. But I have found that if I find the right meditation, and if I can repeat it and I can get comfortable and sleep with it and wake up, it can guide me in a certain way, that I truly was able to reprogram my subconscious. Because there is a point where you can really communicate with your subconscious, and that's right before you sleep. And I love how Joseph Murphy would teach it, that Eve is really just the subconscious, right? And then Adam would sit in bed and they might quarrel, but the one time that they would interact is right before they go to sleep. That's how it is. You go and you meet with your lover. Your subconscious is also your lover, right? You meet at right before you're going to sleep. You have this opportunity to really engage and communicate with your subconscious, and that's when you can change the belief. As I mentioned in the book, you've seen the movie Lady Hawk, right?
Lady Hawk? I'm not sure.
I totally recommend it. It's an
Okay.
obscure movie, but if you get a chance, you should watch it.
Mm.
Michelle Pfeiffer, Rutger Hauer, he was in Blade Runner.
Oh, yeah, I know Rutger Hauer, yeah.
And so the story was, in the daytime, he's a hawk, and at night, he's a wolf. And they loved each other, but they were cursed, so they could never truly spend time with each other. So in the day, she would fly as a hawk, and at night, he would shift into a wolf, and then they would both turn human, right? But as the sun would rise and as the sun would go down, they were both in that form, and they could communicate and talk to each other.
Okay.
And that, to me, is kind of like what's happening with our subconscious, that we can have a direct role and that's why Neville Goddard taught falling asleep to the wish fulfilled,
Right.
because you're in that moment where you're attracting the subconscious. But there are people that have such deep beliefs, even then it's difficult. And that's why I think you can go deep into repetition for some people. And there's so many others. I've seen hypnosis, really well done hypnosis work in changing someone's subconscious. I've seen physical exercises done in a certain way to change somebody's subconscious. And really, with everything that's human, everybody's different. And we're like snowflakes in the way that we adapt and change our beliefs and subconscious. So
It's basically like whatever works for you, right? Because I think that's a good point, because I'm sure you get these questions, because I get these questions a lot where they say, oh, what's the best technique to use? And I'm like, well, it depends. It depends on you, So like you were
yeah,
saying, for some people, it's falling in that, assumption, or doing affirmations during the day. If we want to talk about repetition, is there such
yeah.
thing as a right or wrong way to do an affirmation? Like, what if I were to say something like, I don't want a lot of debt, or I don't want to be sick. Like, what do you think of affirmations like that? Because even though people may not say it like verbally out loud, they probably think it. Like, I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get, what do you think about those affirmations, even if it's like an internal one?
Well, if that's your starting point, then at least you have a starting point. But the bottom line is when you say don't in an affirmation, there is some, especially I learned this when I learned how to do hypnosis, that people don't hear the don't. And so I don't want debt. And then the subconscious might say, I want debt. So you got to be careful about saying don't or negative clarifications. Everybody's a little bit different, but it is good to be a wordsmith when you do your affirmations. Every word is important. I like the you are and the I am. I like to hear a recording saying you are beautiful, you are
Me
wonderful.
too. I like that
I
too.
like that. I am comforted by it. I have a you are affirmation. At the same time, I like the I am. And when I hear it, I can say the I am. I've also tried a combination of both, like literally in one ear, I am and you are flowing in both ears. And sometimes that's great.
Nice.
But really, affirmations are something that you should be a collector. You should collect affirmations. You're hearing them and reading them all the time if you're into spiritual works. And when you hear one that really lights you up, you should write that down, put it up, find it and save it. And then you'll come back to it, because it's not necessarily the words, it's your response to it. It's the way you respond and the way it shifts your state. And so then you can sometimes merge them and gather them, change them. You learn certain words that are powerful. I read this thing on Instagram that bugs me. The thing that says the I am affirmation is just in the root chakra. And you really should be careful about doing that, because that is the biggest BS ever. The root chakra has literally nothing to do with the I am. All of the different things in that, that are good. You can say I know. You can say I assume. I thrive. One of the power things I've learned with affirmation is from Anthony Norvell, and which he teaches. You can give a really elaborate, wonderful affirmation, dig into it, feel it, and then sort of use the first two words later. I thrive and am harmonious and wealthy and wonderful, and I've overcome debt and all these things. And then when you have it set in stone, then you can just say, I thrive. And I found that to be powerful too. But I think that, with affirmations, if there is an underlying current also that I've noticed, I have a popular affirmation on one of my videos that's really large sums of money. I'm so happy and grateful now.
It's a
Large
good
sums of
one.
money come to me easily and quickly. But I've heard other people do that affirmation, and I can hear the energy when they're saying the affirmation. It's coming from a lack. I can hear the nervousness, like it's the energy that when I'm giving my affirmation, I want to come from the state also, and I hear that when I'm listening to affirmations, like that I can feel it. You know what I mean? So it's such a complicated and wonderful thing. But affirmation, you know what? If you're as a Neville fan, do you notice he really didn't teach the affirmation,
Yeah, not
right?
as much, not as much, but he did mention that
Something
obviously
wonderful is
some of
happening
them.
now.
Yeah, yeah.
The only ones
I
I've
am
ever
that I
been,
am. Yeah.
I am that I am. Something wonderful is happening now. I am safe. I'm happy. I'm secure. I think I feel safe. I'm happy
Lavish,
and secure.
steady, dependable income,
Right.
all that stuff.
And
Yeah, but it
literally,
wasn't a lot. It wasn't a
it
lot.
was like there's like 10. I mean, out
Yeah,
of 300
probably
lectures.
probably less than 10.
Right. So he was not teaching that. And I disagree with Neville on that. And I know as a fact that Joseph Murphy and Neville came from Abdullah, and they
No,
learned from the same. And I seem to respond more to the Joseph Murphy way of teaching it. It's a way of speaking to the subconscious mind. And there are these key words that are so freaking powerful that a lot of them, he pulls his affirmations from like Psalms. And then he has there's a certain structure to the Psalm that, and I think, and I have an episode where I read the Psalms. And when I noticed these are magic spells, like I'm feeling a literal difference as I'm saying, and I have no idea what this is talking about. Right. So some of that, right?
No, it's all
Yeah.
good. I mean, just like you, I'm really big into affirmations. I noticed that too with Neville. He just has a handful of them. But like you, I have, on my phone, I literally, before I kind of start my day, like, or start working on stuff, I literally just sit down and I go through my affirmations. And probably people wonder, well, why does Josh have to do that? If he's always like into manifesting all these things, because I'm a words guy, just in general. So
Yeah.
even with my wife, words matter. And
So
so when I
true.
could just read something, like a little short phrase, and
Yeah.
like like you, I feel a lot just through words, especially if it comes from someone that I care about. Like if it's just a critic or whatever that I don't know, whatever. So words don't
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
matter in that sense. But when I'm giving myself an affirmation, like saying I am, or I even say Josh, like I even write stuff down, Josh, you're this. And even though
Yeah.
I'm saying it in that kind of form, like, as if I'm not saying I am, like you, it actually affects me. So I get what you
It
mean
does.
on how it really depends on the person. So what helps you create that state of consciousness and that belief that we're all aiming for, because ultimately that's what we're aiming for, right?
Yeah.
Is that feeling, that belief, because we could be doing affirmations all day, and just like Jesus or even Neville talks about, you don't want just these vain repetitions, but you can start doing it even if it's like empty in
And
the
like you
beginning,
mentioned in your
right?
book, you have a good rec. You
Yeah,
look in the mirror, you look into
yeah,
your
yeah,
eyes, and you say it, right? I mean,
yeah.
that to me is when I go to bed and I've done brushing my teeth and I look in the mirror and you know what I mean? I
Oh,
have
for sure.
that also works really well for me. It's like I'm talking to someone else, like, dude,
Exactly.
listen to me, man. You know what I mean? Like,
Listen up here.
listen, man,
Just
right?
talking to your, even like a little version of you, like talking to that little child inside of all of us. I even do stuff like that. My wife does stuff like that, where you could even imagine just talking to like a younger version of yourself,
Yeah,
and just giving
I'm a
some
big fan of
encouragement.
that
I
too.
mean, just so many things that we can do. And even kind of relating to your story, and how you kind of jump this other timeline, so to speak. What are ways that we can hack our reality and jump into a desired timeline besides affirmations? Like, what are some tips that you can give on how to actually do that? Something very practical, if you could share something with us to jump into a desired timeline.
Yeah. So if we are understanding the way that quantum particles actually jump, when we monitor a subatomic particle and we watch how it actually jumps, it doesn't just slide over, it's not propelled. There's a sudden burst of energy and then it's gone and then it appears in another place. So what is happening when we're shifting into another reality is different than manifesting. Manifesting is sort of aligning yourself to something that may be already happening within the reality. And you're attracting by your actions and words and energy something into your reality that's already there. What you're doing with shifting into another reality is you're shifting into another reality, which means there may be a different past, maybe a different history. You may not be aware of it. You may be holding on to the memory of your past, but it's an entirely different universe where different stuff has happened. And there is a universe where you were super successful. You're entering into a literal different space, a dimension that is different than your own. Each of these realities has a different dimension and flavor to it. And so what I found is incorporating energy techniques is a good first step that I had kind of learned from Cynthia Sue Larson, who wrote a book on quantum jumps. And I could do Qigong, which really amplifies my energy if I do it right, where I do different movements and Qigong techniques. And I'm feeling like pumped up. A lot of times if I'm doing it after a workout, even if my heart's a little bit elevated, I like to hang upside down or get on a vibration machine for a little bit, something that really jacks up my energy. I do a fire breath. And then if I propel myself, I enter into a void state where it's something that I learned from Joe Dispenza, is that you go into a state where there is infinite possibilities. And part of that is sort of letting go of all the things that define who you are, eliminating your identity, the idea of where you're from, your gender, your politics. You start going through the list of things that define who you are, and then you just wipe that clean, and you go into this void space where you are nothing. You're just nothing. And then from that space, you start to see the potentials that are available to you. And then you start to find and imagine a potential for your own life in the way that you want it. And then you do some sort of energy technique and it jumps you into the consciousness. And then you're literally in a different body and you're trying to get used to this new body. And the better and better you get at it, you're traveling the multiverse like an astronaut.
Crazy. You know, that's very similar to Neville's technique. I don't know if you're familiar with
it. Is. He has a heavy breathing technique.
Yeah.
I am absolutely convinced that he was teaching parallel reality shift. Another thing that he taught that's fascinating is literal astral travel into other realities. In one of his lectures,
he did that a lot.
He talks about traveling into a reality, checking it out, and like you're a positron. He taught basically you go into some future event and then you snap back into where you are now, but you're like logged into this new timeline. And so that's what was so powerful about Neville is he was teaching it, though he probably didn't even know he was teaching it. With the limited understandings of science at the time, he had already experienced it. So
he did a lot of astral travel. He just called it imaginal travel, you know, and he would like end up in his sister's place, and you know, the sister would see the sun's face. It would be Neville's face on the sun. I don't know if you remember that story. He did a lot of that. That's pretty
Why
cool.
In that story does he not heal the sun?
I don't know. I remember that one, but he was just saying that you know, no one really dies in the end. But yeah, I know that was a question that popped up in my mind too. So.
Right. Like, but instead of showing but he obviously had his reasons. Like, he's not worried about death. That's really, he didn't go around healing people from death. In fact, I just read a lecture where somebody'd say, I want freedom. They were sick and they were dying. He's like, okay. And then like a couple seconds later, they passed on. He imagined for them and he imagined their death for them. Like, he was never worried about saving anybody.
Yeah, I guess that's his. Well, I know he had so many like out of body experiences where he would see the other side, so to speak, and he just said, "Hey, it's just a continuation. We never really die, you know." But of course, for some of us, we want to continue in this life for our reasons that we have. But yeah, I found that very interesting too. You know, like with those kind of situations, like, well, why didn't you just heal? But you know, sometimes things don't happen the way that we would want it, or maybe, you know. Just stuff happens in life. Sometimes we don't get exactly what we want for whatever reasons, if we fail to manifest or believe in a certain way. But the good news is that consciousness does continue, as you and I and Neville teaches as well. But those are
what I find fascinating with Neville is I still am finding new stuff.
Me too.
I've read 300 lectures, and I'm still finding like, what? Like the other day, I read one where he's talking to another friend that's entering into someone else's body. And then they become the girl, like becomes the girl, and she's driving her new car. Right. And then I had already heard a portion of that. And then I heard the continuation that he got stuck in the girl's body because he wanted her to break up with the guy. And he like thought something sort of unlovingly. And so he was stuck, and his wife said he couldn't move. And so like he was teaching, crazy. Like you have to be loving when you're imagining for someone else. Right. So,
you know, me too. I teach Neville stuff pretty much every week for the longest time, and I'm always finding new stuff because you got to like dig through his lectures, right? Because obviously his books are limited, but there's just so much in his lectures that he's had for
the
decades.
Lectures are so the falling backwards is interesting. The idea that he would teach that like he says Walter Blake or William Blake told him this. He had these visitations from William Blake that he taught him, oh yeah, if you want to travel to you just fall backwards into your reality. So I have a falling backwards meditation where you feel yourself falling backwards.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, that's amazing.
I never know what I'm gonna get because there's still probably something new out there, right?
One of the things that I did appreciate, another thing I appreciated about your book too, was because not only are both you and I into Neville, but both of us got really into reality transurfing. And I'm not sure if that's how I discovered you, but I know that was something that I was grateful for, because I studying the law of attraction. Obviously, we talk a lot about resistance and all that stuff, but I think with transurfing, what really helped me to understand that part better was the whole law of balance thing. And I would teach that on my channel, and I remember that was eye-opening for a lot of people who were into Neville and into law of attraction, because they've never really heard like just the way Transurfing taught it, the law of balance and how all that stuff works. And when I read that part in your book, I really like the way that you explained it. And yeah, do you mind explaining what the law of balance is and how it works for our listeners that are not familiar with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a universal law that everything runs to balance. So if you look at nature, the water may be sloshing around, but eventually it's going to go to balance. Everything goes to balance. And so what happens oftentimes in the manifesting community, somebody wants to meet a specific person or they want to have a specific job and they're so desperate for it. Then they're like, please, I want this so bad. Please, I want this so bad. And then like, please, 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 please. And like they put it up on this pedestal. They make it so important that there's a balancing force that literally comes into play and knocks them off the pedestal. And so in order for you to properly manifest that thing that you want, you cannot overemphasize it so that the energy becomes bundled up and distorted, because in that importance, in that got to have this, there's also this little bit of lack, like I can't have it, it's not going to happen, I don't have it yet. And because of that, that's the balancing effect that occurs. And a lot of people found this very applicable, not just in philosophy, but they found when I reduce the importance of this thing, like I really want to get into this new house, I want to move to this new city, I want to, whatever it is, literally everything, that if I can, I want this, but I'm going to reduce the importance of it. And when I do that, it is more in line with truly manifesting, that it's that sweet spot, that Zen flow. You see it in sporting events when people try too hard, they don't do it as well. It's right. Literally in everything. I see it in tennis. I see it in so many things. So if you can find that sweet spot in your manifesting, that's how it is applicable, at least for what we're talking about. And that's how they talked about it. There's a balance with everything. So if I'm super arrogant, I'm going to be taken down on some level, right?
Humble pie.
Also, if I'm super too humble, then it'll be raised. Like literally every portion of your personality needs to be balanced. There's a really cool technique I learned in the Law of One. Is like as you go to sleep, go through the day. And if this was hard for me from the manifestor perspective, consider the opposite emotion of whatever you went through. So, if you were hateful, then you were loving. You imagine the loving part. And if you were loving, you imagine the opposite. You imagine the hateful part. So that you balance your emotions, you balance the flow of these emotions. You know where you are and what you want, and you know what your focus is. You're here for love, but you also energetically need to balance these emotions, because these distortions are creative. And so the law of balance is super important, because there's always a balancing return effect on everything that you do.
So how would we do it? Like if I were to give a specific scenario where someone says, well, rent's due tomorrow. Okay, I shouldn't place too much importance, but it's due tomorrow. What do I do, Brian? Like what's something practical that I can do?
Probably the hardest thing, right? I mean, it's probably the hardest thing to learn how to deal with importance. But Neville would have taught you if your rent's due on Friday, you get the feeling of Friday.
Oh,
and you just go into it. And it's no problem. Just gonna feel it. I got the belief, I got the faith. But hey, it's hard for us when we got to pay their damn rent. We're going to lose our house, right? Right? I get it. And so,
how do you reduce that?
Right. So if you can get good at that, that's when you know that that's a huge test. And so when you have highly emotional moments that are uniquely centered within yourself, if you can separate yourself from what it is you're trying to manifest so that it's not self-importance, if you can continue to do this and remind yourself on a regular basis, what happens is, I think ultimately you have enough wonderful successes that when you do have that moment come up where the rent is due, you know it's going to work out because of the number of times it's worked for you in the past. And the truth is, I'm telling people that are listening, is that I've had the rent due. I've had the rent due on Friday, and I have had a $20,000 payment when I was with Amazon. And I was like, I have no clue how I'm going to be able to pay this. And I had the money that came in to the dollar on that day in my account. And so then I was like, I was blown away, right? Then the next time it happened, I still doubt it because your part of you still thinks that was just, that's just luck, right? But it will continue. And so it's an art. It's an art, and it's hard to hit against a 100-mile-per-hour pitcher. It's a lot easier against a 75-mile-per-hour pitcher, or somebody throws up a big softball to hit the ball. And so that's one of those harder times in which to use your imagination. But if you can control your emotion and stop future thinking, well, a lot of time it's doom thinking, where you're thinking of the worst case scenario. I kind of learned that from Tim Ferriss in the 4-Hour Work Week. Just take the worst case scenario. Is it really going to be that bad? Then, okay, I'm going to reduce the importance of this. I'm going to see myself getting the money. And then it seems to work out. If you can release the expectations of it sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's always going to be a lot harder than and so I recommend trying to imagine that you receive your rent continually in harmony, in the best interest of all, on a regular basis, and continue to affirm that so that you never ever have to worry about it again. And then that always works out better,
That is much better, instead of having to always have it last minute, right? So you want more of like
Right.
an overflow. So with you, like you were mentioning the money, reading your story too in the book, like you did have some financial difficulties, and then you eventually got out of those like large, sums of debt. What's a good technique that you can share for just people to have that accumulation of just money coming in on a regular basis, without having to
Well,
just barely make
debt
it?
is obviously one of the sneakiest, the hardest things, because as soon as you focus on, you're going to get more of whatever you focus on, you seem to increase.
You
So,
even said that as an affirmation, right? Where you said more of, and then you got more debt.
right.
So you were talking about like having to
So
be more specific.
yeah, there's a couple really good affirmations for that. And I would just say, I'm so happy and grateful now that for the complete payment of all financial obligations in God's own wonderful way. And I would continue to say that it wasn't about the debt, it's just complete payment of financial obligations. And I'm grateful for it. And I wouldn't focus on the debt. And then the large sums of money affirmation really works for me. I'm continually thinking of large sums of money that come to me easily and quickly in increasing quantities from multiple sources on a continuous basis in the best interest of all, with the free will of all, that I get to keep, give, invest and circulate joyfully. And if I
Bam.
continue to say that on a regular basis and embrace that, it's literally a lifestyle. When you receive large sums of money once, that's great, but then you don't receive it again. That kind of sucks. It was nice that one time, but then it didn't work, right? Or if you get the large sums of money and it's super difficult, like you had to jump through 1,000 hoops, and you had to apply at the bank, and it took like 5 months, and then like a million times it almost didn't go through. That's not any fun. You don't want to. You want it, and you want it to come quickly. So you get the money, and they say, "Yeah, we'll have it for you in 4 years." And so you're waiting for 4 years, and you're thinking about it, right? You don't want that. So you always want the large sums of money. You don't want the penny, even though it's wonderful to get the penny. You want the large sums of money that comes to easily and quickly, and then you want the amount to increase. What oftentimes you start getting some money, and then it goes down and it starts fading out. So I try to imagine the money increasing continuously. So it's not just one time that it increased, continuously, and from multiple sources, so that I'm not focused on just this one source of income. And then if this income falls through, and then I'm starting to worry about, well, what would happen if this doesn't work out, or I get shut down or something.
Too much importance.
Right. So I reduce them from multiple sources on a continuous basis in the best interest of all, because you always, whenever you start manifesting, you get opportunities to make money where you can really hurt other people. You can manipulate them. You can scam them. It seems like it's a part of the system, the game. You're given, oh, you can scam these guys. You can make some money. Do you want to do that? I mean, you need to survive, right? So I want to manifest opportunities that are in the best interest of all, with the free will of all. So I'm not enslaving anybody. And then I get to keep it, because many times I would get money, and then I would immediately have to pay it back out. Like, oh, I got 20,000. Oh, it's gone. And like, oh, I did manifest a large sum of money, but then I had to pay it because there's a judgment that came in, a bill that came in, or some weird thing that came in, right? So I want to keep it. I want to invest it. I want to circulate it. I want to spend it, because I want to be able to spend it however I want. And so that's sort of the mindset I'm going into. And that's one way I try to affirm and imagine it. Yeah.
That's good. I'm glad you mentioned even the spending part, right? Because if you're hoarding too much of it, that's also placing too much importance,
Yeah.
all that energy in one spot. So you talk about like just manifesting more money, and but when someone is trying to imagine like large sums, and we try to tell them just imagine having a large sum of money, try to feel it. But what if someone says to you, Brian, but how can I imagine and feel something I've never experienced before? What would you say to that?
You start to ask by saying, what would it feel like if? And you just play around with that question. What would it feel like if I got 20,000 in the bank? What would I do? Who would I call? Would my friends, who would I talk to my friends? What would I spend it on? How would I spend it? Start spending that and then going into that.
Oh
You
yeah.
can figure out what it feels like.
Yeah.
If you ask yourself, what would it feel like if? That's a good place to start. But it truly is the hardest thing, because a lot of times I find people do manifest the large sums of money. They might turn on Breaking Bad and they see a garage full of money, and then I manifested. They talk about it in reality transurfing, like, there it is. I manifested it. I literally saw it in my reality. It's part of the story that I'm watching on TV, right? So it has to be something that you feel and experience for
For
yourself, that you are
yourself.
a part of.
Yourself, yeah. Good point. Good point. Because Neville even talks about it's like the power of implication, right? So instead of thinking of the money of itself, what would you do if you had all that money? Oh, I'd be buying
What
this.
would you
I'd
be
be buying
doing? Who
that.
would you be talking to? What would you be
Yeah.
experiencing?
Good point that you
Right.
shared.
The heart is the
Healing.
manifester. The subconscious is the heart. And I think that it doesn't care about actual amounts. Like it doesn't even, a million is the same as a dollar. It's the experience of it, and the experience of it. When
Right.
I
Good
say
point.
large sums of money, I'm thinking in my mind about the experience and freedom of it. I am free. I am free when I feel that. It's the signature of freedom and satisfaction.
What you shared in your book too, you were talking about how you even had some issues with your health. Um, like you had experienced pain one day, like at breakfast, and you were able to like heal yourself. Do you mind talking about like how can we manifest and hack, our reality when it comes to health?
Yeah, I think in the book that it was kidney stones. It is possible when you get sick in the middle of the day or whatever. If I woke up and I had a cold, and I tell everybody in the world, "Hey, I got a cold. I'm sick. I'm sick. I got a cold," then it's just going to continue. But if if I say and declare, "I'm happy, I'm healthy, everything's going well," oftentimes that you'll see that it gets better. There's always a mental connection to your sickness on some level. Sometimes the sickness itself is a symbol of what you're experiencing, and
Right.
your obvious pattern is, well, I'm sick. I got something. I came down with something. But if you can remember in those moments that the whole world is a mental construct, and you can find that place where it's mentally happening, or simply say and affirm that you're better, sometimes you'll get better. Obviously, that there are different levels of healing that are involved with anything. But I had gotten out of the habit when I start to get sick, that I just assumed that I was sick. And I would say to myself, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling better. And it does work. You can put yourself into a state that improves your condition for sure.
One of the things that is really big in the manifesting world is they talk about love, right? Specifically romantic love. But even though you did address that, one of the things that I did like about your story in the book was this whole topic about self love, loving yourself, especially with something that you were struggling with as you were growing up, and something that you were self conscious about. And as you know, my story when you interviewed me, when I was talking about like my hand
Mhm.
before, and I was always conscious about it. And when I read
Yeah.
your part of your book, I didn't know this part about you until I read that part of your book, if you know what I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
deeply self conscious about something, and then you were able to over time overcome it. You mind sharing that a little bit?
Yeah. If you're interested in romantic love and you don't love yourself, well, how are they going to love you? And really, it's the first step to any sort of love is to finding love for yourself. And so sometimes that can be kind of hard, but it's the way for you to learn about how to love someone else. You forgive yourself, you see your flaws, you get used to it. But if you can come to a true love of yourself, and for some time people that actually means spending some time alone with yourself, getting to know yourself. But everybody struggles with it. I see it all the time. I see people that have such a low self-image, low self-esteem. I wish there was more that I could do. I wish I could tell them that they're beautiful and that they should be loved and they love themselves. But there really is nothing that anybody can do until they themselves can look in the mirror and say, you're pretty cool. I love you, man. And that's hard to do, and it's hard to explain or experience. It's not selfishness. It's not arrogance. And some people might mistake it for that. It's not narcissism or anything like that. It's a level of acceptance, of giving yourself permission, of truly in respecting yourself and allowing yourself to be who you truly are. Is that self-love. You enjoy spending time with yourself. The first thing to really look at is, okay, do you enjoy spending time by yourself? A lot of people don't. They feel very uncomfortable by themselves. They need to be with someone else. So, I mean, that's the first step, but there's a lot of other steps to it. But if somebody out there is struggling, finding love, just take a step back and ask yourself, do I love myself? And if not, deal with that. And then you'll start to bring out things that are loving about yourself. And then you'll find love in other places. I was able to find wonderful romantic relationships once I was able to love myself. And before that, I was always attracting other people that didn't love themselves, or I wouldn't, you know what I mean? It was other people that didn't love themselves, or they didn't respect me. It was always a reflection of how I treated myself.
Yeah, totally. Because you can manifest the money and the fame or whatever. But if you don't love yourself, it's, how fulfilling and meaningful will those things be? I mean,
Yeah.
even like when you were talking about how you were insecure about a certain feature of your body, you were wondering too, like how you would deal in the relationship world. And I was feeling the same way where, like even when I was a kid, like I'd be cutting my hair all the time, trying to dress all cool, dress up in baggy clothes and,
Right.
be a break dancer. But even though I did all those things to try to like look good and be cool, I was very insecure about like, because of my hand, I just thought, okay, no matter what, a girl
Right.
still wouldn't like me, which is like the weirdest thing, And then just like you in your book, when you were insecure about your underbite, if you remember,
Right.
like you were
I
talking about
remember
that,
that
like
part.
you didn't realize that people actually liked you,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you were so doubtful. I was so doubtful about myself. And when people say nice compliments to me, I'm like, no, they're just lying, like in my head
I
growing up.
remember what you're talking about. Yeah. And I had an underbite where I could put 3 fingers from the first. It was all the way out so that um I could not smile. I just couldn't do it. I would never smile because it would show my, you know what I mean? I was really bad. And so when I got the surgery and had my jaw adjusted, it was very painful. I was jaw wired shut for 3 months.
Wow.
And then I came out. I noticed that people treated me the same as before. I was expecting people would be all like, nicer to me and it would be cooler. I noticed part of that might have been, I was much more accepting of myself, but I really realized a lot of it was just me. A lot of it was, and you might have also realized that, like, we overjudge
Exactly.
ourselves. And everybody that you go to the mall, go to the shopping center, when you're walking around and you see everybody, just know that 99% of those people are just completely in themselves.
Yeah, they don't
They
care.
don't even notice anything about you, right? Like,
They don't
they don't
care.
even notice. Like, you think they notice your shoes? They don't even notice your shoes. They're thinking literally about themselves the whole time that you're talking to them. They're thinking about what they're going to say, and they're thinking about themselves, right? And that's just how the world is, right? So people appreciate attention on them, and you can show them attention towards them more than just, anything else. So, but yeah, I mean, that was it. It was because I really thought that I was going to be treated totally different once I could smile. You know what I mean? So yeah,
No, that's good. Good point. Love yourself first. Everything kind of flows from there,
yeah,
right? I mean, as we conclude, Brian, I was really touched in your book when you were just being so vulnerable, talking about how like there was a point where you wanted to just give up and you just lost a lot of hope, but then you didn't. I mean, as we end, is there anything, just in case there's anyone listening where they feel hopeless, they feel like giving up? Is there any message that you want to tell them?
yeah. If you're out there and you're feeling discouraged, I just want you to just take a step back and just wait one day. You know what I mean? Just wait one day. That's all you got to do. Just trust me on that, because I promise you that deep within you there is a spark, and you can literally overcome anything, and you can do anything, you can have anything, you can experience anything in a single breath, in a single moment. Everything can change. And if you could just for a moment be aware of your power and what's available to you and the potentials and the things that you can do and the things that you can experience, the places that you can go and the wonderful loves you can experience. I know it's hard right now, and I know it feels like the end of the world. Of course it does. What has happened to you is terrible. It's totally horrible. It's not fair. It's not right, but you are not alone. Joshua and I are with you right now. I promise you, we share this moment with you. We're in this space with you, and we're telling you that it's going to be better. It's going to be better. That whatever you think is going to happen, it's not. The worst case scenario that you have in your mind is never going to happen. And it's not as bad as you think. And the good stuff that's still available to you is so much better. I promise you, it's truly amazing. And if you can just take a step back just for this moment, and know that I promise you that it's going to get better, that you're caught in some track of your mind, or you're thinking about some future thing that may never happen, or you're stuck in the past, some terrible thing that happened to you. Just let it go for just this moment. Take a deep breath, go to sleep, take a nap. When you wake up in the morning, just know that from that moment on, you can have it and do anything that you want.
Love it. There you go. Brian, the motivational speaker, just came out right there. All right.
That's right.
So Brian, I really that was touching, man. That even spoke to me. You know, what's next for you, bro? Because I know you have a lot going on. I mean, are you working on a second book, or are you just really busy with your podcast? And
I
what's
finished
next
the
for you?
second book and decided not to publish it. I'll send you a copy. I've
Okay.
sent people on my newsletter a copy. It's called the Field Manual for the New Earth, and it was so complicated to research. I researched different channelings and different books that talked about the New Earth, that I realized that it was just like, if I was to properly write it, it was going to be like 1,200 pager, and it would be boring as hell, and it'd be a lot of quotes, and so what I had was I was okay with, but I was like, I'm just not cool with it. Maybe I'll do some episodes out of some chapters, and I'll start working on another book eventually. But if you're like me, it's not about the book or anything. Every episode I do of my podcast is my creation. That's where it's at. You know what I mean? I enjoy it
I
so
love
much.
that.
Each of those are a piece of art to me. When I create those are special to me. And each of those episodes, I feel like I create a book in every episode that I do.
Exactly. Yeah. You have
And to
one of
me,
the,
that's,
honestly, Brian, I gotta say, you have one of the best channels on YouTube that I've seen when it comes to the spiritual, area. Like yours is seriously one of the best.
thank you, man. That
There's
means
like
a lot
you have
from you.
everything. You have everything on there.
Yeah.
So and it's top quality too. So yeah, I
I'm
commend
really
you for
proud
that.
of it. It's something I'm proud of. It feels good to have something like that I'm proud of. And here's another secret: is a lot of those episodes are just me trying to talk to like leaving a note for my son someday. Like he'll come along and he'll be like, how do I do this? How do I let go of my past or something? A
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
times that's what I'm doing with my episodes. It's just sending a little letter to my son or somebody out there who needs it. You know what I mean?
So when you cross over, that's your immortality. You live
It's
on and
my
all your work.
immortality, right?
I appreciate
Right?
that, man. So I mean, what's the best place? Where's the best place people can reach you? Like your website?
You can find me at therealityrevolution.com, and the best place is Brian Scott on YouTube.
Okay, cool. So Brian, it was an honor. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, brother.
It's a pleasure to even just call you friend. And hopefully, next time, when I'm in
Yeah,
Cali,
last
we'll,
time
we'll
you were
hang
here,
out.
I
I
invited, we were
know.
supposed to hook up. You were
I
supposed to come
know.
for breakfast. I
I
tried to have you over
know.
for barbecue. I
Crazy
felt bad,
schedule.
but no, it was also my fault too. We both had different times and we didn't hook up. So next time
It's
you're
all
here,
good.
brother.
Next time, for
All
sure,
right.
for sure. It's
Yeah.
already done. So, Brian, I want to just say
Sounds good,
thank you,
man.
man. It was a pleasure,
Thank you, man.
and thanks for being on the show. I appreciate your heart and just everything that you're doing. It's making a huge, huge difference. I know that crazy. Like, there's just so many lives that you're reaching more than you realize. I just
You
want you to
too,
know
brother.
that. Like,
I'm proud of you, man. Every
thank you.
time you put out a new episode,
Appreciate that.
you're changing lives, and I appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. You too. So, alrighty, guys.
Let's go,
Once
man.
again, thanks for watching. Till next time, we're out. Peace.